You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com and sign up for free webinars and online events today. Hello, and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and as a productivity and ADHD coach, I help overwhelmed professionals reduce procrastination, improve time management, and get more done with less effort so that they have more time, energy, and money for the things that matter most to them. As you guys know, I'm a woman with ADHD myself, so I've been there, I've done that. I've lived in that constant state of chaos and overwhelm and feeling like I was underperforming to live a life of more success and fulfillment than I really thought was possible for me at one time. And I do believe that every single one of you can share your own version of success yourselves. You can learn more about me and what I do and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. And if you text the keyword hack, H-A-C-K, to the number 33777, I'll send you my 7 foolproof productivity hacks to help you add hours of free time to your weeks by investing just a few smart minutes each day. Well, today I have with me Ryan Mayer, and in a moment we're going to talk about a topic that will be helpful for many of you, I'm sure, and that's ADHD and money, particularly defeating your ADHD debt. So welcome, Ryan. Thanks for joining me.
Lynn, long-time listener, first-time guest. Glad to be here.
You crack me up. Well, tell our listeners a little bit about you, where they, what you do, where they can learn more about you, all that good stuff.
Sure. So my name is Ryan Mayer, and I reside here in tropical Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm a certified ADHD coach. And, you and I were talking right before we jumped on the air. We both went through the same school. So the ADD Coach Academy, where I got my certification, class of 2020. And really just every day, I love what I do. And that's the first time in my entire career that I can honestly and genuinely say that. So I work with my clients. I just try to be a beacon of hope for them because I too am blessed to be wired with ADHD, and I'm helping them to navigate the storms that ADHD cause in their life and just empower them to be happier. Because when it comes down to it, everyone deserves to be happier. And so that is my goal every day, to help to remind them of why they are so awesome.
That is awesome. So you want to go ahead and give out your website?
Yeah. So it's ryanmayercoaching.com is my website. Currently going under a revamp. Really excited about it, but you can still go visit it. So it's Mayer, kind of like John Mayer, the guitarist, if you're familiar with him. So ryanmayercoaching.com. And then we may or may not get into this, but I also do a fair amount on social media. Coming up on 400,000 followers on TikTok.
Wow.
So ADHD _coach _Ryan. So ADHD Coach Ryan. So would love to have you follow my content. I put out a video a day.
Awesome. I don't know how you have time to do that. That's amazing, but it is good stuff. It is really good stuff.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about a topic that is something I'm sure you hear from your clients as much as I hear from my clients.
Yep.
ADHD and money are not always kind of simpatico, right? So many of us struggle with debt. So many of us struggle with, one of the things I see in my clients a lot is just they don't even want to look. They don't want to know, right? Shame,
exactly
all
right.
of that kind of stuff. Why do you think we struggle so much?
Well, I think a lot of it gets back to what you just said, that there is shame that is infused through our entire lives of those of us that have ADHD, because our whole lives, we are always told, if we would just try a little harder, if we just wrote something down, or if we just paid attention, but we end up falling short of our potential or running late or paying late fees or not doing it the way everyone else says we should be doing it. And that applies to money as well. And so we practice good old avoidance behavior where we don't want to even look. Like we know it's probably going to be bad. We don't even want to look. And so because of that, all these bad things happen. So we go with our impulses, and many times we're making purchases that we know we probably shouldn't make, but we do it anyways. Like, yeah, I'll handle it later. And then it ends up really coming back to bite us when we have to pay all that interest. And I know when you and I had our talk a couple of days ago in preparation for our meeting today, and I loved how you said, it's like if you think about ordering a pizza on a credit card,
yeah,
you would normally pay, let's call it $20. But if you end up having to pay for that pizza for several months after that, you're going to pay like $30 or $35 for the pizza. So that's a long-winded answer to say we buy things that we probably shouldn't.
we do. And I think there are a lot of things that come into play in terms of ADHD characteristics that make money management harder for us and more complex for us, right? There's that, even if you don't consider yourself an impulsive person, most of us have some element of impulsivity, right? I am not a bungee jumping, that's not how it shows up for me. But the impulse buys of the small things have been a problem for me at many times in my life. Those damn end caps, the dollar section and whatever. Those are the things that I would have trouble with. I have had clients who have gotten themselves into big trouble buying big expensive things like businesses and vehicles,
like businesses,
and things like that.
That's
right?
Not what I expected you to say. That's hilarious.
But it shows up, and houses. It shows up in very different ways, right? And any of them can be just as problematic. And then there's the whole executive function thing, right? There's thinking ahead, and the whole time perception thing for a lot of us is problematic. We're in the now. And there's the executive function. I always think of that as sort of like the adult voice in my head saying, you're going to be sorry later.
You probably shouldn't do this.
but then, it's like the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other that was going, it'll be okay. I'll figure it out later. I'll look at it later. I'll whatever. And it's that now versus not now thing. And then managing the sort of the math side of money it's executive function stuff, right? We've got to organize it. We've got to track it. We've got to keep an eye on it. We've got to keep records. Those things are not easy for a lot of us with ADHD.
There are very simple questions about finances that are very overwhelming for those of us with ADHD. For example, before I became an ADHD coach, I had a career in sales. And one of the biggest challenges for people in sales is you can use a company credit card, but you only get reimbursed if you track your expenses.
Right.
So that means you have to categorize all your receipts. And there was a lot of times where I would take a loss simply because I didn't want to face that pile of receipts and have to organize them. Same thing with just organizing household kind of things. Like, do you know how much money you spent on groceries? Do you know how much money you spent on entertainment? Do you know how much it's going to cost to pay for that car, like the car fix that you need to do or whatever, all these things. And then talk about the time blindness. Like, we think about now and paying the bills, but what about the future? What about saving for kids going to college or saving for our own retirement? And there's a stat that I just heard 2 days ago that 70% of Americans, and this was like not even ADHD specific, but 70% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck, meaning if they lose that source of income, they're in deep trouble. Yeah. So when I started seeing all these facts, Lynn, I just decided like, this is not something that's necessarily like, I don't love talking about money. In fact, I avoid it just as much as most ADHDers do, but I just know that money has such a deep emotional tie that like, I wanted to start helping other ADHDers because if I can do it, then anybody can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we talked in our, a few days ago, like in prep for this, we were talking about the emotional connotations of all of it and how, so many of us have so many different areas of our challenges that are really get embroiled with the blame and shame. I always call it the blame and shame cycle, right? Yep. It's attributing the things that you struggle with to your moral character, to who you are as a person, right? So I don't manage my money well, therefore I am irresponsible. Not I have irresponsible behavior, or I'm not great at organizing or tracking or even hanging on to and remembering what I did with all those damn receipts, right? Yep. But I am an irresponsible person. That is a character judgment. I will hear people say, I'm not good with money. That's like when people say, I'm not good at math. Well, that's a big, wide blanket statement.
Yep.
It's for sure in coaching terms, a big old limiting belief, right?
Yep.
Because I guarantee you there are pieces and parts of it that you are good at. There are pieces and parts of it that you can find your way to get through if we can get rid of some of that emotional, moral judgment, blame and shame crap. It's such a big topic, such a big topic. So one of the things you and I talked about is, briefly tell our listeners a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about your story of overcoming financial hardship.
Sure. Yeah. And again, it was kind of my motivation for getting into this whole thing, because growing up, like many families out there, like my family, we didn't really talk about money. If you needed money, I worked a job in high school. And then if I was going out to the movies or something, my dad was always really good about, hey, like, here's 10 or 15 bucks or whatever to go be out with your friends. So like, we weren't rich by any means, but we were never in a hard spot. And so like, I never thought about debt or money, really. We just lived our lives. So then fast forward when I graduated from college, and it just ended up being this really big wake up call of like the reality check of, adulting, as people call it, where it's like, hey, here's a new job, but now you're going to have to pay rent. You're going to pay for your car. You pay for your phone. You're paying for your utilities, your groceries. If you want to go out, that costs money. Oh, and by the way, here's this huge stack of student loans that you're also going to have to pay on every single month. And for someone who never really thought about money, it was a really rude awakening for me. And so again, like, I just imagine it's like a lot of people when they come out, when they start out of school or whenever they start working, they realize like, oh man, this is not that easy. And I didn't have the highest paying job. So this is literally how my financial management would go. I would go to either the gas station or the grocery store, or I was out for dinner with friends or whatever. And I would use my debit card and just hope. That was literally my strategy. I would hope that it didn't get rejected because I was out of money. And then the only way that I knew how to stop spending was when I would start getting envelopes through my mailbox from my bank saying, you've overdrafted your account. And I kind of became numb to it, as many of us do, where it would arrive and I'm like, okay, like that means I'm done spending for the month. Like that was all it meant to me. It wasn't like, hey, this is maybe a red flag I should look into. And so I just know that there's other people that, whether it's overdrafting accounts or overspending on a credit card, that there's listeners out there right now who are nodding their heads like, yep, that's me. That's my story. And I just thought that was going to be how life was. But thankfully I met my wife, Andrea, and we've been married now for 8 years. But when we first got together, I was very embarrassed to be able to like tell her like, hey, I only have like $500 to my name. Like I've been working hard, but I'm paying off these student loans and I'm like barely getting by, basically. Fortunately, she said like, hey, I love you, not money. So she helped me, and we got enrolled in Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. And this is not an advertisement for that or anything, but it was just the program we happened to go into. And Lynn, it just totally transformed my life because it helped me re-examine the way I look at and treat money. And fast forward, because I know I want to make sure I'm not getting too long-winded, but I think it was like maybe 4 years later. I mean, it was a process, but we were able to pay off all my student loan debts. We paid off our cars. And we are at the point now where the only expense we really have is kind of like the monthly, whatever the normal expenses and our mortgage, but there's no credit card debt. There's no student loan debt. There's no car debt. And it is still weird for me to even say that, but I'm really proud that I've been able to do that. Yeah. And the thing is, I'm only coming on to your podcast to tell people, even if you have ADHD, it is possible. I promise you can do it.
It's not easy. And the first thing we need to do is change. In almost all my clients, we've got to change our mindset about money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things when you and I were talking, one of the reasons I think that, we've been able to become, my husband and I've been married for 30 some years, started with nothing. And I told Ryan my first, and I'm quite a good bit older than Ryan is, but my first job, I made $13,700 a year.
Wow.
And we had student loans, and of course we had rent and we had bills, but we had nothing. We had cinder blocks and plywood painted coffee tables and entertainment centers and hand-me-down, furniture that other people had discarded. But I was able somehow or other, I think probably with a little bit of the influence of my husband, the engineer, who's very like sort of linear and logical and black and white, have a relationship with money that is about numbers. It's about addition and subtraction. It's about resource allocation and not guilt and shame so much. Not that I never had that, because when I was younger, especially like up until my kids were young, and I really started to re-examine how I was like dealing with the impulse. Like, I've never been someone to go spend $100 on something impulsively, even though in the grand scheme of things, I guess to a lot of people, that's not like a big ticket item, but it was always the $20, $10, $5 stuff that would add up and be problematic for me. So I did have problems with impulse control. And that's for me where the blame and the shame and that sort of moral judgment stuff would come into play. Learning how to manage that and learning how to detach that from that emotional moral judgment stuff and start to look at it from like strictly an addition and subtraction sort of perspective really helped me. But it really is for so many of us about the mindset stuff, and then finding a way to manage it, all that executive function organization stuff, in a way that's simple for you and practical and easy for you to keep up with. But it is doable. It's very doable. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy and you're going to do it overnight. It's changing your thinking about something and your habits takes quite a bit of time, but you've got to believe that it's possible.
It's amazing to me now how I'm just such on the same page with you with that, Lynn, because I'm just so neutral about money.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me anymore. It's just like, is my family happy? Am I happy with the job I'm doing? Are my clients good? And it is really, I make it more of a game.
Yeah.
Like, let's just eliminate the debts. Let's take care of things as efficiently as we can. And I've tried to unhook the emotion from it. And we do that, honestly, I know one of the things we were going to maybe talk about is budgeting.
Yeah.
And that has been the cornerstone. So if you all are listening and you only take one thing away from this, it is doing a monthly budget. Because here's the thing, and Dave Ramsey talks about this too. If you don't assign a label or a duty for each dollar that comes in and goes out, it will disappear.
Absolutely.
We just met with our financial advisor to kind of, recap the year. And he's like, Ryan and Andrea, I can't tell you how impressed I am with how you guys track. And we do it I'm not even kidding, like pencil and paper. We print out this budget and we just know like, hey, here's how much we spent on gas and groceries and whatever. And he said, I have clients who literally there's like $20,000 or $30,000 a year that they just literally don't know where it went.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And I'm sure as people who are listening to this, you're probably thinking like, yeah, that's probably me. Yeah. And it's because people don't have the discipline to do the budget.
Absolutely. And the belief and it's talking yourself. Most of it, I hear the word budget. And even though I've done it my entire life, that word still gives me like the heebie-jeebies, right? Because there's something, it's like diet, right? There's something restrictive and, what's the word I'm looking for? It's
repulsive.
That's not the word, but that's a word.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Repellent. Yeah,
but it's like it's constricting. It's confining. That's not quite the word I'm looking for, but it really is. It is just it's just numbers, right? It's just pluses and minuses, and it's just being aware. Once you can start to be aware, you can make choices, and that's the difference. When you don't know where your money goes, when you don't know where you're spending it, or when you're afraid to look at it, it really does. It it'll allocate itself, really. And then you're not in control, and then you're not making choices. And that's not a very happy, pleasant place to be. So any quick tips? We're getting kind of toward the end here,
but I'm so glad you bring that up, because I think it's important for me to say this, that I still don't like doing a budget.
No.
Because you would think like, oh, Ryan's out of debt. Like, oh, sure. It's great for you. Like, it'd be great to review if you're like doing well. Nope. Like, ADHD doesn't go away. No. I don't ever say like, wow, honey, I can't wait to do our budget. In fact, we always joke about it. Like, Ryan's going to be super grumpy because he has to do plus and minus. And it's like, so I'm just telling everybody, even though I'm out here saying do a budget, I'm not saying it's going to be fun or easy, but I promise at the end, you're like, okay, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and it's not always good news, right? I mean,
of course, right?
It's more times than not, it's not great news, but it at least right?
Yes.
You know where the pluses and minuses are, and you know what decisions you need to change and what kind of adjustments you need to make going forward. It's not fun. My husband and I just did sort of like the last 12-month snapshot of the budget.
Yeah.
Looking to see, where things go. And, I'm the one who pays the bills. I'm the one that, does most of the shopping, all that kind of stuff. And he was like, we've spent how much on that damn cat this year? And there's a little conversation about that, but we know, right?
I know. And I know we're coming to the end, but that just reminded me of just this quick story of when Andrea and I first got married. This was very chauvinistic of me, but I was like, now, honey, I'm the man. I'll handle the money. And it was so funny because within about 4 months of being married, we almost had our lights turned off twice because Ryan forgot to pay the bill because of his ADHD. And I go, here you go, honey. And I handed it over to Andrea. And 8 years later, we have never lost power or water because Andrea has paid all of our bills. So my point, it's a funny story, but my point there is, don't be afraid to say what you're not good at. Right. And whether you are single or married or whatever, have someone who you trust who maybe is neurotypical or is good with numbers, because there's people who are willing to help you or pay for it, because now we have an accountant and stuff. So anyway, it's not going to be easy, but get help and don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's important. Absolutely. Good stuff. So getting help, making sure, you take off don't be the ostrich with its head in the sand, right? Mm-hmm. Take off the blinders and take a peek, right? That's a start. It really is so much about awareness and finding an easy way for you to start to keep an eye on, when my husband realized I had this such strong aversion to the restrictive term budget, then the conversation was always about, we need to look at where the money's going.
There you go.
And that's a very different way to me. Mm-hmm. Budgeting means I'm only allowed to spend this much money. And there's a little bit of that inner 3-year-old kind of thing that comes out. You're not the boss of me. I work hard and I'm going to spend my money however I want to. Super mature and super constructive. So finding your way to look at it, reframing how you're thinking about it, really catching the emotions and the moral judgment stuff. You are not a bad person because you haven't developed good habits and behaviors and a good mindset around money. It's just it's an area for growth. It's an area to work on. And it's not about who you are as a person.
And to put kind of a bow on that too, this is something that I just recently kind of got over for me too, is don't worry about how much money you make either, because there's people who make millions of dollars that are deep in debt because they can't get their money right. Mm-hmm. So don't attach that with the value of yourself as a human or a person. That part doesn't matter. All that really matters in a budget is think about, every month, you can't spend more than you make and ever get out of debt. Right. So you just have to live within or below your means. That's the kind of the key.
Right. And again, it's not easy, right? But it's possible. It's doable.
It's possible.
Changing your relationship with money is doable.
Just get started. That's the key. It's just like so many of the tasks for any ADHDer. I'm like, you're listening to this, and I know there's that thing that when you just get it started, whether it's like cleaning or whatever, as soon as you get started, it's like, oh, this isn't that bad. And I think that every single time we do the budget. So
absolutely,
just get it started.
Absolutely. And pull that, just find your way to get find your way to wiggle into it. That's the way I always say it.
Yes.
So tell our listeners a little bit again, Ryan, tell them where they can find more about you. And you have a webinar coming up as well. That you can mention briefly. If you go to the ADHD Support Talk.com website, we will have the link to that webinar with a promo code for you. Ryan has generously offered us a 50% discount for being here and for listening to the show. So go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you. And it is not about money. And that's why the full price of the webinar is $10. So 50% off, like give me a $5 bill and I will share everything with you that I've learned about budgeting. So it is on Friday, November 12th. Would love to have you, your listeners, or all of your friends stop by. And I'm going to be talking about actionable steps that you can use that are ADHD friendly. And you'll have downloadable forms and everything that you can take with you just to get your money under control. But just remember, you're not alone in this. And we want to back you up just like Lynn does with this support talk. So thanks again, Lynn, for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Ryan. This was a lot of fun. Totally. Guys, we appreciate your attention. We appreciate your time. Feel free to join us in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook community if you want to keep the conversation going. If you have questions, again, we can connect you with Ryan. If you visit ADHDsupporttalk.com, you can find the link to Ryan's upcoming November, you said, I forgot
12.
that fast.
It's okay. Friday
November
the
12th,
yep.
2021 webinar, and a link to Ryan's website as well. And again, thank you, Ryan, for being here. And thank you all for your attention as always.
Thanks.